Hello, mambo, uko poa? I know, hauko poa, but please accept my warm greetings and my very warm welcome to my show today. As I keep saying these days, I believe the more you understand, the more you appreciate what is really unfolding in Kenya, the quicker your healing will come. Because it has also worked with me. I've been deeply wounded. I still am. And many of you will remember, I still have wounds from early in the year. Therefore it has not been easy. But God has helped me. And I firmly believe that with more knowledge and more understanding of precisely what is unfolding, it becomes easier to heal. So karibu sana to my show today. Now usijali. I know you're feeling better today than yesterday, and I know tomorrow you'll feel even better. Now, what are Kenyans feeling on the ground? What are they saying? Kenyans are very disappointed with the ruling of the Supreme Court. Yes, we respect it. Yes, we accept it. But the vast majority of Kenyans are very disappointed. They are very angry. Many Kenyans believe that the Supreme Court completely destroyed democracy in the country called Kenya. Our last line of defense against tyranny let us down, failed us at a very critical moment. And of course all this is not helped by the many lawyers, many experts who find that judgment puzzling. And of course it's not helped by the fact that people like James Orengo have confirmed that a lot of the evidence they presented before the Supreme Court, which ended up being labeled as hot air, wild goose chase, a lot of that evidence was gotten from the DCI. Those are professional investigators. This is what they do for a living. They investigate to find evidence to prosecute people in a court of law. That's what they do. And yet this time round, the evidence ended up being hot air, wild goose chase. You know, many years ago, I was the last line of defense. And I used to feel the heavy responsibility on my shoulders. My constant nightmare was failing my team as the last line of defense. And one day, I was selected to play for the Kenyan national team. And I was the last line of defense for the country called Kenya. And before that game, in a town called Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, I was obviously very nervous. You see, although the selectors for the Kenya national team had chosen me, my teammates and even the coach did not have any confidence in me. And looking back, I don't blame them. I just finished my A-levels. Technically, I was a schoolboy just a few months earlier. And so in the first game, I was put on the bench. I didn't play. And we lost. We lost very badly. Not because I didn't play, but many things went wrong. And so this was the second game. Those who are familiar with the game of rugby know that the fullback is the last line of defense. And here I was playing fullback, last line of defense for Kenya. And very early in the game, one of my teammates, one of our players, was carried off the pitch on a stretcher. And I looked at it and I told myself, even me, let them carry me out on a stretcher as the last line of defense. Better they carry me out injured badly, than for me to fail. And I ended up having the game of my life. So much so that at the end of the game, we were approached by some Wazungus offered a lot of money to cross the border and play in South Africa, which was then still apartheid South Africa. Yeah, in fact, the passports Kenyans had were stamped, allowed to visit all countries except South Africa. Meaning that if I took the deal, crossed the border to play rugby in South Africa for good money, I would never see my family again. I would never see Kenya again. Of course, I had no way of knowing that just a few years later, Nelson Mandela would be released and things in South Africa would change. And Kenyans would be able to fly in and out of South Africa with no problem. There's no way of me knowing that. And so, I declined. Actually, a number of us who had been approached declined. Our last line of defense in Kenya, according to a vast majority of Kenyans, failed us. That is the view of a vast majority of Kenyans, who are of course not supporters of UDA or Kenya Kwanza. But what is really nagging Kenyans, what they can't understand, is how Almighty God allowed this last line of defense to fail us. How could He? Now I want to encourage you today. I know that is an uphill task, considering the situation today. But that won't stop me from trying. The truth, and nothing but the truth, is that God would not have allowed it unless He has a plan. But what plan? Well, we know that throughout history, Almighty God has used human kings and earthly rulers to judge His people. Kenya is under judgment. To reform the nation. We all want reforms. Remember that prophecy? Change shall come to Kenya, but it shall not come how people expect it. And it shall not come when Kenyans expect it. I'm sure regulars on this channel remember that overturned prophecy, Rider, by the Nigerian prophetess. And then, after the nation has been reformed, the whole idea behind all this was so that God would lead the hearts of the people, me and you, Kenyans, back to God. And in our case, we know that our hearts will be led back to God for the great revival. So be encouraged. There's a plan. Things will happen. All this is not for nothing. The pain you're feeling right now is not for nothing. Find out more in the spiritual section of this video towards the tail end. That is something you can start to really look forward to. Oh yes. Now before we get started, please make sure that you're on the same page as the rest of us who have taken in my weekly intelligence briefings, especially number 84, number 85 and number 86. Very revealing. Reveals what really happened behind the scenes politically. Super fascinating stuff. I'm sure you can see details on your screen right now on how to become a member of my WIB in case you're not. And if you're already a member, I'm sure you've seen the latest WIB number 86 in your inbox. And I'm sure you've taken it in. And I'm sure you are left gaping. Oh yes, crazy information. Something that you must take in. And so if you're not yet a subscriber, take advantage of that special offer right away. You'll also get all the other previous WIBs, and even going forward, there are other very hot numbers coming out shortly. Because a lot of this sensitive stuff we cannot discuss on this open public channel. No way. They're way too sensitive, right? So make sure you get that info. Right. Let's not take up any more of your time. Let's get down to business. Twende kazi. Let us all agree on something. Anybody who tells you, forget history, history is boring, let us not look into history. What for? Let's look at the now and here. Anybody who tells you that is deceiving you. It is satanic, for sure. Bottom line, anybody who does not want you to look at history, who encourages you that history is boring, wants to make sure that you never find out the truth. They're deceiving you. Okay? Because for starters, it is impossible to look at history and come to the conclusion that there's no God. It is impossible. Not possible. But there's something even more important, especially for now, the now and here, that history can do for us right now. Okay? History repeats itself. And therefore history will be able to tell us what is about to unfold in Kenya and what kind of Kenya we should expect in the next few months and indeed going forward. History will never fail to give you that, because man keeps on repeating history. Man keeps on making the same mistakes. Yeah? Different forest, the same monkeys. Always. And we all know that in Kenya right now, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear about the future. Wouldn't you love it to know exactly what is going to happen going forward? History has the answers. Right. In 1992, a president was sworn in Kenya who was unpopular, which means that that president was loathed, disliked in many, many regions in the country. And that president was, of course, President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, the late. The bulk of Moi votes in that 1992 election came from the Rift Valley. Yeah. But he had come a strong second in virtually all the other regions in the country, in very many regions in the country, including strongholds of the then very powerful opposition, powerful but divided. Many Kenyans at the time, and I was there, already analyzing politics, many Kenyans at the time were sure that the real winner of those elections was a man called Kenneth Stanley Njindo Matiba of a party called Ford Asili. Fast forward to the present, and many of those facts are still true with our current situation as we await the swearing in of President William Samoei Ruto on Tuesday. And the opposition at the time in 1992 held a press conference rejecting the election results. And of course at that time we didn't have a Supreme Court. And therefore Kenyans were worried, what next? And the vast majority in the country were not supporters of KANU and President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. No, they loathed him. They wanted Moi gone. as soon as possible, like yesterday. Everybody said Moi must go. Okay? So what happened next? That should be pretty interesting for all of us. Because we're waiting in 2022 to see what will happen next. So let's break it down. The propaganda machine of the KANU party got to work. Yeah? And Kenyans were told, accept and move on. Because after all, this opposition, whom you wanted to take over power, can't even decide amongst themselves who they want to be president. They're all greedy for power. Because if you add all their votes together, they beat Moi. Yeah, resoundingly. But since they were divided, Moi won narrowly. And that narrative sank into the minds of Kenyans. Yeah. And many of us concluded, because these fellows were divided, greedy for power, wacha wajisort. As we did our part, we voted. Shauri yao. And then another narrative that excited all of us suddenly emerged. We were told, hey, look at Parliament. There are so many opposition people there. Great minds. Like Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, yeah, who at that time was entering Parliament for the first time. Brilliant man. An exceptional scholar. How will these illiterate KANU sycophants in Parliament deal with such a man? That will be interesting for us to watch. And then we had Kenneth Matiba as the leader of the opposition in Parliament. That just meant fireworks. And then we had both Odingas, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and his son, Raila Odinga, both in Parliament. KANU hatawezana na hii. Let's wait for Parliament. And so in that way, Kenya moved on. And then something else started happening. That is happening in 2022. We started seeing major defections from the opposition to KANU. And what really upset Kenyans about this is that the defections were from real opposition strongholds. Luo Nyanza, Mount Kenya region, there were defections to KANU Mama na Baba. And in the end, the KANU government dominated Parliament. Yeah, with some very interesting debates, with strong opposition. But bottom line, they dominated Parliament. And Moi was able to govern successfully from 1992 to 1997. Where again it was a rinse and repeat. Precisely the same thing happened. Yeah, the same events. More or less. Yeah. So, the question is, in 2022, will history repeat itself? Will it happen in exactly the same way as it has happened twice before? Is that how this thing will end? In my opinion, no. Why? Because there are very many differences now in 2022 from what the situation was in 1992 and 1997. Top on the list, we are under a new 2010 constitution, which was not there in the earlier examples. Number two, President Moi was a very wise man, crafty, wise, and very forgiving. In all fairness, if you compare the character of Daniel Toroitich arap Moi and the character of William Samoei Ruto, there are a lot of very distinct differences. And there's something else. We have other centers of political influence. I'm talking about the counties. And then the last and most convincing reason, yeah, this very scenario completely failed to work in the year 2017. Do you remember? Jubilee had the majority in Parliament in 2017. And even then, it failed to work. Indeed, in 2022, Azimio has a slight majority in Parliament, very slight, which is rapidly vanishing with defections to UDA or the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. But the truth, history tells us, is that it failed. And ultimately, the circumstances forced the handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Amolo Odinga. Something which our current president has always been very bitterly against. He says that handshake spoiled everything. That handshake derailed the agenda of the Jubilee government. Yeah, that's what he firmly believes. That is what he has always firmly believed. But let's look at the political reality. Is it going to work? Like it ultimately worked in 1992 and 1997? As I've already said, I don't think so. The Narok Senator, Ledama Olekina, has recently said something very interesting. And indeed something that has touched many Kenyans. He has said disgruntled regions from our just concluded general elections may push for secession. Now, we are back to 2017 narratives. Remember? Many of us were pushing for secession. Yeah? Leave the country to that community or those communities. And then let the rest of us, who have never tasted the presidency, who are always sidelined, whose votes don't count, let the rest of us form a brand new country. Yeah? Now, such a narrative emerging so early in the game is worrying, because you can be sure this is something that is going to gain momentum going forward, because a lot of Kenyans are still hurting. A lot of Kenyans are still very angry. A lot of Kenyans are saying, I will never vote again. Indeed, if there was an easy way of removing yourself from the voters register, maybe online, you would be shocked at the number of Kenyans who would remove themselves from being registered voters in the country called Kenya. That is the reality. And so far, we have not seen any signs from the Kenya Kwanza government that is about to be formed of bringing the country together. So far, we haven't seen that. Indeed, we have seen the opposite so far. In fact, what we are seeing is payback mode. Yeah. Where, my friend, Citizen TV? Where is Inoro? Indeed, you don't need to go far to see this payback attitude. Over the last few days, I've been very busy deleting comments. Yeah, but I've let some of them pass. From UDA sycophants and employed keyboard warriors belonging to the UDA party. Yeah. Chris, you were wrong. You were very wrong. Your analysis was biased. You see, now Ruto has won. What are you going to do? Etc., etc. It is clearly payback time. In sharp contrast to what Moi would have been doing at this particular time, bringing the country together, making appointments from all areas of the country, including opposition strongholds, etc., etc. Moi's sycophants were not going around saying, where are those gutter press publications that were against Moi? Where is Njehu Gatabaki's finance magazine? Insulting Moi all the time. Where are they? And now Moi has won. Moi is very popular. No, they were not doing that. They were not doing what UD and Kenya Kwanza are doing in the year 2022. And so in all likelihood, we can only expect very different results. We can only expect a very different scenario from what we saw in 1992 and 1997. But there's something else much more worrying that we should look at. 2022 is also like the year 2002, exactly 20 years ago, when something happened that had never happened before. When something that has never happened over the years and has only happened in 2022 happened in that year 2002. And that is the exit plan and strategy of an outgoing president failed. You see, Moi's plan was to hand over power to another member of KANU, the KANU party at the time, Uhuru Kenyatta. But Moi Kibaki of the opposition ended up winning that election. And Moi was forced to hand over the sword of authority to the opposition, to Moi Kibaki. Fast forward to the present. President Uhuru Kenyatta's plan was to hand over power to Raila Amolo Odinga, his handshake brother. Now what is super fascinating is what followed after that. Because you see, the relationship between the former President Moi and President Kibaki got so bad, it was so serious, that President Moi started issuing statements complaining about how Kibaki boys were tailing him, following him everywhere, spying on him, so that the former president could not enjoy his retirement away from power. Now, will history repeat itself? Because in 2022, the situation is even worse. We know that the relationship between outgoing President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and the new President William Samoei Ruto has been very stormy. And now that President Ruto will take over power, what will happen to President Uhuru Kenyatta? Will he in the near future start issuing statements similar to those that Moi issued? And you know, this time there's a very worrying difference. You see, when Moi left power, he was very unpopular with Kenyans. But Uhuru Kenyatta has got massive support countrywide. He is very popular with Kenyans. Of course, those who support UDA don't like him, for obvious reasons. But he has support from most of Kenya. And so, what is going to happen here? In my opinion, it is a very sensitive area for the incoming government. Because when you have a former president who has massive support countrywide, complaining, and most of the country is behind him, it's not a good situation for any government in power. It's not. But let us wait and see what happens. Let's move to the spiritual. In my opinion, the most important. Because the spiritual controls everything. It controls what is going to unfold. And has already controlled what has unfolded. Very important. Now, in a previous video, I likened the Ruto presidency to that of a king in the Old Testament, King Jehu of Israel, actually the 10th king of the northern kingdom of Israel. And once again, I highly recommend those of us who are spiritual and those of us who want to understand this thing very deeply, I highly recommend that you read carefully the book of 2 Kings, chapter 9, which talks about this king, how he was anointed king, how he became king, what he did, his political moves, etc., etc. Super fascinating. Indeed, this is a classic example for those who think that the Bible is bedtime stories, fairy tales, ancient wisdom, etc. Nothing like that. Because the story of the kings of Israel is full of drama, violence, bloody saga of political intrigue, political turmoil, shifting power, deception, conflict, division, betrayal. Siasa yote iko hapo. Hey, make no mistake about it. And the story of King Jehu is no exception. And in my view, it is a very clear portrayal of what has happened in Kenya and what is going to happen shortly. You know, for a very long time on this channel, we have been saying that spiritually, Kenya is in the season of judgment. And we know, at least those of us who read our Bibles, that God has always used human beings, human kings and earthly rulers to judge his people, to reform the nation, and to lead the hearts of the people back to God. That is exactly what used to happen. And we know it is the same Almighty God we are dealing with. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, and forever. King Jehu was used to reform Israel, to eradicate the worship of Baal completely from the nation. The worship of idols, the idol Baal. And therefore, it would not be far-fetched to expect the presidency of William Samuel Ruto to completely eradicate a certain stronghold that has annoyed God Almighty in the country called Kenya. A certain stronghold that has been evil, that has caused God Almighty to be angry. I have no idea what it is, but I'm sure we're going to find out shortly. Now, it is interesting that Bible scholars describe Jehu as being a king who was zealous, assertive, and politically cunning. Does that sound familiar? I ask again, does that sound familiar? Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.